welcome to Networking Star. My name is Jeffrey Boyle, and here we are the bastion of freedom of speech, right? I've got with me my older and more prestigious brother. Say hi, Brian.
How's it going?
So Brian is Brian has a law degree. He practiced for years. He worked in the Idaho Supreme Court. He worked in Washington with the state of Washington with a lot of different high-tech businesses, and is just an overall know-it-all as it relates to constitutional matters. Is that fair to say?
Not even close. I mean, the factual assertions, but holding me on that pedestal is not.
Okay, the last one maybe not so much. But he is without question, we have had some amazing, spectacular debates as it relates to free speech. And I think there's a lot of people, not just us, that are very, very concerned about what's going on right now. So we thought that we would take a very interesting approach to this, where we went out and found some great things as it relates to freedom of speech and just how it's being destroyed. What we ask is you hit that subscribe button. You also make sure that you're notified, because we're going to do this every week. And we're going to show you not just what's going on and from an attorney's perspective, and really someone who is super concerned about freedom of speech. I am a graduate from law school, but I'm the entrepreneur. And what I'm bringing to the table is just outrageous opinions. And of course, also, I've built an artificial intelligence platform that I use for businesses. But it's also going to give us a very unique perspective of what dead politicians may have said, and based upon what current politicians have said. Here's the tricky one: what politicians of the current ones, or contemporary ones, may say if they're not clouded in their judgment with their current thirst for power. So, Brian, welcome to the Constitutional Conversation. And our first matter of business is you found this one and you sent it on. Why don't you take care of this first quote from the very distinguished Justice Ginsburg?
All right. In a speech she gave in 2009, you can Google and fact check this. In fact, I encourage you to do so. But this is what Ruth Bader Ginsburg, a bastion of left political thinking, said in 2009. In the United States, I still believe that the way to fight bad speech is not to ban it, but to fight it with true speech, to use the opportunity to educate people onto the falsehoods that others are speaking, but not to close down the right to speak. That's much too precious. Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
I think the only thing that they had a problem with her is that she didn't cede her seat earlier before it was passed over to a very, very conservative justice that followed her. But other than that, the people loved her on the left. And what's been really curious as we go through, and we'll show some of these different things that are being said, and we'll go through last as it relates to what AI is saying that these politicians and these different justices would have said. But it's really interesting. And so even though AI isn't quoting or citing them directly, it's really interesting because it can contextualize and it can put together a lot of their different opinions and thoughts, and we can have a pretty good idea of what they would say if they weren't on CNN or MSNBC trying to really make sure that they're pulling for their party. But we found a couple different things on here that we thought were really interesting before we get to the AI stuff. And we found this by Elon Musk, and he wrote, "Unless there are a few issues where you at least slightly disagree with your political party, then you're not in a political party, you're in a cult." It's very safe to say that I am conservative. It's very safe to say that probably even be libertarian, where I just want to live my life and you can live yours and just leave me the heck alone. And quit taxing me so much. Quit trying to force your opinions on mine. You can live the way that you want to live. And I think that I really became more and more, subscribed to that after my second year of law school, where I saw that there were some really intelligent people on the left side, Brian, and you can talk about it as well. But I think both of our favorite professor wasn't even liberal. He's probably closer to communist. He was probably someone that we in our constitutional law class.
Yeah, he was a mixture of a communist and somebody who liked to get people really upset. I think his measure of success was how many Republicans he could get to walk out of lectures. And so, I think a lot of that was him just stirring the pot. But I I wish I knew where he was and what he's doing. But
Well,
shout out
he
to
was funny because
Jimmy Mack.
he Jimmy Mack, he was actually our sponsor for the for the libertarian groups that we went to, and we went to the when we went to Harvard. And I remember when I went to Harvard, we had a very liberal professor up there that was talking, was from Harvard, and I think that that's kind of what we're seeing. And I'll describe what we were talking about: juries. And on the jury, he said he wanted to abolish the jury. He wanted to make sure there was no more juries anymore. And his rationale was that the common people, a jury of your peers, they didn't have any right. They didn't have a background on the law, and they were not fit to be able to pass judgment. And I remember one of the more right leaning professors on the board said, you want to get rid of all of the history and all of this jurisprudence that's gone on. You're willing to completely destroy all of that so only a select few can make the judgment. That's completely destroying the Constitution. And I remember his response was so arrogant, and it was, so be it. Like, wow.
Interesting.
And I think that's what we're seeing now. I mean, we had talked about that earlier.
Well, I mean, I would just encourage people to read the Constitution, take your politics out of it, take your emotion out of it, read it. You can do it in about the same amount of time that you can watch 4 TikTok videos of housewives dancing, and just read it and see if you disagree with anything in there really on its face. And do you really want to rip that up? Because, I mean, who knows what's going to get it passed in its place. So just take a minute and read it, please. At least the Bill of
And I
Rights.
think that the point that you're making all along in this is you're supportive of it when your party's in power, but when your party is looking to get more power, it's really convenient to start ripping up part of the protections that we get from it.
Totally. I mean, like, everybody wants free speech if most of the speech and the people in power that are speaking with any level of authority are, preaching the gospel they want to hear. But the second somebody else, says something else, you want to cancel it. And so, the thing about the Constitution is it cuts both ways. And during my lifetime, I've gone through several presidencies. The first one I remember is President Ford. I mean, I remember his name. I don't really know his policy. I am old. And being on camera like this makes me feel even older. I'm looking at
It magnifies the crow's feet. Is how
it magnifies my flaws and my lack of physical presence on camera. But so I remember President Ford. I remember Jimmy Carter being elected. I remember things like the hostage situation in Iran, the invasion of Afghanistan.
Yeah, the botched one.
Yeah, I remember, the Soviets invading Afghanistan. I remember the 80s quite well, the 90s even more so. But really, the point I'm making is I've seen political power swing back and forth over and over just in my not so short lifetime. And the one prediction I can make is that politics are going to swing again. Right now, people on the right feel like they're being oppressed, and their rights are being attacked, and sometimes rightfully so, sometimes not. But at the same time, if the Republicans gain power again, which in my lifetime I can't guarantee, but I'm pretty sure will happen, the people on the left are going to feel the same way. So the way that we act when we're in power pretty much guarantees a tit for tat when we're not in power, whatever your political beliefs might be.
And to slam that, and I think that that's why we started with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because she has been such a bastion of it. And this is what we're going to show with the new Facebook files, which Facebook was forced to do. Twitter did it. Elon Musk wanted to expose some of the things that were going on there, and then Facebook was forced to do it. But it showed that Facebook, they wanted to censor even the jokes. They were not amused even by the jokes. And and as they went through, as you go through some of these different files, what you'll find is that not only were they suppressing them, but even the very left leaning Facebook staff, even they were starting to feel very uncomfortable with the not just the asks that the government, that the administration was asking, but they were very much being forced to do it. You look at it with Zuckerberg. He said that they were being forced to censor, not forced, but they were very strongly encouraged, however you want to take that, to censor COVID misinformation that ended up being true. And he said it undermined their own trust. Yeah, we go through here, and recently, this is very interesting on here. If you look at Zuckerberg, says establishment asked Facebook to censor COVID misinfo that ended up being true. If you do a search for this on this really cool website called ground.news, it will show you that the only sites reporting on this news are the right-leaning sites. None of the left-leaning sites are even reporting on this. So it talks about the bias distribution. It's like the left, who used to be this bastion of, freedom of speech, they don't even want to talk about it. You continue to go through these. We were trying to find some of this information on left-leaning sites, and we weren't finding it. They were censoring the content. And you look at here, this is by the GOP, so of course it's going to be about the left, but this is all about them over the years, starting way back with the hanging Chad of Bush Jr., all the way through Hillary, complaining about the elections being stolen. They bellyache every time they lost, and somehow or another, now they're
during my lifetime. Well, except for Reagan versus Mondale, that was a pretty clear election.
That was pretty much a blowout.
There's any close election in my lifetime, the party who slightly lost, by, within the margin of error, whatever, has always complained that there's probably some kind of election problems, whether it's not, fraud's a strong term, but irregularities, or, perhaps the machines weren't working. And so, we're seeing right now a former president, whether you like the guy or hate the guy or in between, he's being prosecuted for saying, hey, we need to find election regularities, or, who knows why he did it. I can't get into Trump's head. But if that's the case, let's just watch a little bit of this video and see how that has been happening for the past 2 decades.
So you've got Kamala, you've got, all of these guys start to do this, and it's just example after example after example of people complaining how that it's stolen. And right here, he's talking about Russian interference. We know that the Russian interference was manufactured by Hillary Clinton, for heaven's sakes. I mean, we could even have this playing in the background, even without the sound on it. But it's just scary as you go through these different things. And it's Kamala Harris, it's Hillary Clinton, it's Joe Biden. It's just time after time after time of them claiming that these things were stolen. And you got Jimmy Carter saying that you have person after person. Jimmy Carter didn't get anything stolen from him. I mean, he doesn't allege that, but now you've got parts of the secret parts of our communities all weighing in when they all knew it wasn't true. But it is crazy how much they denied that this happens. And now what they're going after Trump for right now is saying that he knowingly lied, whereas the Supreme Court has said you can lie. You can lie. It's part of free speech.
If politicians got prosecuted for lying, holy cow. I mean, we could walk down to my HOA board and throw all them in jail too. Let's do it. In fact, I think it's a good rule.
So it's okay for some of them to lie, but not for him to lie. And you have people celebrating this. Well, what they're celebrating is really this just huge degradation of the First Amendment. And I think that that's what is so concerning.
Yeah, I mean, let's bring up the First Amendment. Can you put it on screen, Jeff?
First Amendment provides that Congress makes no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting its free exercise. It protects freedom of speech, the press, assembly, and the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances.
I think that sounds pretty good. Freedom of speech, the press. Let's focus on the press a little bit. So, you figure when this was written, we're talking, the late 1700s, and there was a concerted effort to repress speech. And so, absent a government board, which in and of itself is problematic, the founders of the Constitution they felt that a free press that couldn't get prosecuted for, say, insulting King George or, Louis the 14th, a free press would on its own go and challenge those in power and share the actual truth with people. Now, as news has become big business, you've seen that largely news is now. I don't care if you're a Fox or a CNN guy. I really don't care. I think you're a good, fine person. It depends on what their advertisers want politically more than it does their quest for the truth. And so when the founders founded this country, they felt like a free press was essential because it would hold the government in check and do things like fact checking things they say. And if they lied, the press would write it and people would read it and they would get circulation. But what we've seen is that the press can be bought. Problematic. Politicians can be bought.
You even see it that we can only speculate why Tucker Carlson was fired, but I think it's a lot because he didn't care what the guys like BlackRock wanted. He called them the lizard people, and I think that's more. Yeah, and I think that was problematic even for Fox News, which was supposed to be the bastion of the conservatives.
Well, I mean, let's take somebody else who figured that out and has been coming out and saying the same thing. Tulsi Gabbard. She was a Democratic presidential candidate. I mean, she wasn't popular enough to win, but she was popular enough to participate in debates. And she's saying the same thing, is that the press is not an independent free press anymore, and that if as she says, Tulsi Gabbard, that our politicians don't care about us, and the press is not just a free press, but it's an extension of the government, then how are we going to get the truth? How are we going to do that?
But I think that's the point. So you've even got Jimmy Carter, who, let's be clear, is Mr. Irrelevant for years and years, that they're porting out here to say Al Gore won, and then after that they're saying that Trump lost. It's just that the thing is it's okay for them to do it. That's what they have to do. Say it, preach it, whatever you want to. But these guys know. Prove it, and don't silence them. But what we're concerned about isn't just this; it's that we are seeing that nobody on the left is covering at all the fact, or even troubled that, because the left, it became a pet project of the left for the COVID restrictions and the lockdowns, and even trying to give kids the vaccine when there's so many people who didn't care. And it was crazy. It's like my body, my choice all of a sudden became a mantra of the right, and the left completely abandoned that. Is that we're forcing you to do it, and there's so many things showing over and over that the things that that they saw on Facebook, just they were suppressing them. It's pretty crazy.
Well, I think what you're saying is, and I think it's a truism, is that if you're in power, yes, you do want to control the narrative. If you're not in power, you don't want the narrative restrained. And so, back to my original point, politics is going to swing back and forth. The pendulum is going to go both ways. So if any party in power, whether it be the Republicans or the Democrats, if they're in power, they're going to want to control the narrative. And they're going to try and suppress what people on the left are saying. Okay, fine. And what we're seeing, the past 2.5 years, for most of the past 2.5, how long has it been? How long has Biden been?
It's almost 3 years now.
It feels like a decade.
3 years of hell.
3 years of economic hell. But so when that switches, do people who lean left or are more deeply left, do they want people on the right using the same tactics, the Department of Justice and so forth, to go after them that they're using right now to go after people on the right?
And I think, of course not.
I think that's a terrible idea. I really, really do. I think it's just a terrible idea.
It's a terrible idea on the right side, because it'll swing back. And I think this is where, let's be clear what we're about to show next, this next quote. We are not comparing the left or the right to this guy that we're about to show.
We're comparing human nature. We're comparing the nature of power.
But what we will show is that the bastions of the left, the bastions of the right in history are saying, do not degrade the First Amendment. Do not. And I think that what they're even seeing with COVID is that it was a giant mistake to not allow them to second guess the government. To before you start pricking us in the shoulder and putting it in kids and putting it in adults, it should have been the choice of the person. And that's what we're trying to get to, is even with
Well,
the Facebook
and
is
even, I think it should be the choice of the person, but just to ask the question, how long have you tested this? Are you sure about this? Boom, canceled. That seems a little
yeah.
draconian. Anyway, so
Well, not
yeah,
as
let's go through
draconian that
this.
you can't even tell a joke, for heaven's sakes. I mean, that's the crazy part about this,
Oh, you're
and that's what's
canceling
so wild.
comedians.
So let's bring up the worst thing that we could talk about. This is a terrible human being, and I think that what we're trying to say is we simply do not want to get here.
Yes, we do not want to get here where, I don't know if you're familiar with Joseph Goebbels or not. I have studied Nazi Germany as a way to think, how in the hell did this happen in the first place? But yeah, I mean, read what he says.
If you repeat a lie often enough, people will believe it, and you will even come to believe it. And that's where it just starts with him. He was big and just taking a lie and just propagating it, propagating it. He was one of the worst human beings ever to live. He was very responsible for Hitler's
Yeah,
rise to
Genghis
power.
Khan, Attila the Hun, Joseph Goebbels. I mean, horrible
Novices,
human.
these guys were this guy right here, Goebbels, was kingpin of terrible, right? And so even with
Yes.
him, propaganda works best when you are being manipulated. So when those who are being manipulated are confident they're acting on their own free will. And a lie told once remains a lie. Just you keep going through his stuff, and it's crazy
It's
how he talks
disturbing.
about disturbing. And when you start to see some of this stuff happening, and what I loved about law school is the first year all we did was argue. No one would bend on anything. By the second year, you start to learn, hey, that person's pretty smart, and you start to
Yeah,
respect though you
that's actually a
disagree.
pretty good point. I mean, every once in a while you're like, yeah, you actually made a decent point. So, it was
Well,
kind of
and
helpful.
and you start to respect him a little bit more. So, I mean, like this one, a lie told once remains a lie, but a lie told 1,000 times becomes the truth. And that's where we're getting. That's where you're doing. And I think the thing is that, uh, the things that Trump did, yeah, we should examine them. Even as a guy who voted for Trump this last time, we should examine them. We should see if what happened. But then it should be covered at the same time. These secret documents that all these other politicians had, namely the current president. The current president, as you're uncovering all these things, it's not even being reported on by the left, and I think that
Well,
that's what's so disconcerting.
right now we're talking about the First Amendment. Like, should people be told to shut up or pay some kind of consequence? I think no. Um, Eventually, we'll get to the Second, Fourth, Fifth, 14th, 10th Amendments. But today is about the First Amendment. And what we're seeing now is a total shutdown of things that the policies, the powers that be right now, they don't like the narrative. So they're taking all means necessary to shut down an opposing narrative. And I find that extraordinarily dangerous in the long run, because eventually they're not going to be in power and the other side will. And depending on the draconian nature of what happened when they weren't in power, do we want that power on the other side against the people that did it before? I mean, we don't want this. This is just not good for
Well,
America or humanity.
so what we did was we put into my Bimoto AI platform, for it to analyze. Now, understand, these are not things that these people said. This is whatever you see the Bimoto on here. These are, but what's really great about artificial intelligence is it can take hundreds of their writings. It can distill it. You can ask it a question, and it can hypothetically give us what they would have said. Now, Oliver
Yeah, do
Wendell
not
Holmes.
attribute this to fact. It's we're actually in a way also demonstrating what AI is, which I think is important right now. So
Well, and it
let's
just
just
shows you really its power. It's also its limitations. But
yeah.
what's great about this is if you read this about what Oliver Wendell Holmes would have said, and we asked it to give its a point of view based upon Oliver Wendell Holmes' writings, and what Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg claimed recently, the scientific establishment and representatives from the White House asked his platform to censor posts about COVID that ended up being debatable or true, and give what Oliver Wendell Holmes could have said, who was
By the way, Oliver Wendell Holmes is one of my favorite historical Supreme Court justices.
what AI guesses that he would have said is, by restraining the flow of information on platforms such as Facebook, a discernible chill descends upon the lively marketplace of ideas, stifling dissent and inhibiting the collective progress of society. I would say he's against it.
Well, Oliver Wendell Holmes was a powerful writer, and this sounds about like his tone. So let's keep going. See what else.
Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I think it's safe to say that had she not been influenced by the politics of the day and the scare tactics that were used, and as we look back on it, I think, and this is what it did. Once again, it took a lot of her writings, and this is what she says in here. In examining the Facebook case, Ginsburg would caution against the insidious nature of censorship. I think that is right there, insidious nature. This sounds a lot like a lot of the things that she talked about. And I think that what's so crazy about it, the unwavering commitment to the protection of minority viewpoints, and without question, the minority viewpoints, some of her first big cases were men being oppressed. And later, of course, she became a bastion for so many different things. But without question, the minority viewpoints during this time were, hey, do we know really what we're putting in us, or
right.
Shouldn't we have a conversation about this?
So let's go back to our favorite law school, the communist professor, Jimmy Mack. He was a huge champion of minority rights, meaning that the minority viewpoint can't simply be stifled and stomped. It just can't. You have to consider it in your decision-making politically with policy and judicial rulings. And, I didn't understand it at the time. I was, very passionate about whatever the hell I was passionate about back then. Who knows? But keep going.
So now we're going to do JFK, another. I don't think just of the left or just the left. I would think that most Americans see him as one of the most articulate speakers of our time, and so this is what AI, based upon, we have a lot of things that he said and a lot of things documented, and this is in his voice, his AI voice.
Kind of his communication style, or
we have a lot of documents, and so our founding fathers, in their unparalleled wisdom, recognize that an open marketplace of ideas is the lifeblood of a thriving democracy. By protecting the expression of diverse viewpoints, the First Amendment ensures that the nation remains a bastion of intellectual discourse, innovation, and social progress. Once again, as you read through this, you can see he is saying alleged censorship. He is saying don't. AI version.
Okay. He potentially would have said, based on things that
like this one.
AI knows.
This one I love. Introducing censorship under the guise of safeguarding public interest can cast a long and foreboding shadow across the landscape of public discourse. I mean,
even if he never said that, that's a pretty good statement.
It's a killer statement on why it is that it's so dangerous that they are doing. And Thomas Jefferson, same thing. He's basically saying, it's the bedrock of a free society. And he talks about the dangers going through here. And then Abraham Lincoln, same thing, very similar, where you're talking about just this, even those deemed debatable possess the potential to challenge our assumptions. That's what we were talking about during this time. That just bugs the heck out of me, that no one was able to challenge an assumption, and many of the assumptions proved wrong. Right?
You mean conspiracy theories like lasers and all that?
That's why
they turned out to be correct. Wouldn't that be nice to know that we're acting on correct information rather than political or corporate or whatever interest? I think most Americans, I don't care where you fall on the political spectrum, want correct information. I think that's a fair point.
Even the scientific community, you have to challenge all of the results. You have to challenge them, and nobody was allowing this. Now, the AI would not do something in the
for obvious reasons.
For obvious reasons. But what it did say is Goebbels held a disdain for genuine freedom of speech and individual expression. As a staunch advocate of totalitarian ideologies, he believed in absolute control over all forms of communication and information dissemination. Tell me that this country that stood on freedom, and you've got this killer statue out there, the Statue of Liberty, that we are not allowing the suppression of divergent ideas that challenge our established ideology. That's what's crazy about it,
Right.
and what's also so interesting. Tucker Carlson
Yeah.
is a great read. I almost ought to just post this one. It is so, he has tons of.
Okay, he's a living, breathing human being. He did not say this. You
Yes,
asked it to.
but once again,
Okay.
it's taking a compilation and it takes the question. And this is what the Tucker AI said. Let's get one thing straight. Censorship is a dagger aimed straight at the heart of our democracy. It's a weapon of the choice for those who fear open debate and diverse perspectives. And he goes on, and by suppressing posts about COVID-19 or 19 under the guise of filtering out the debatable or true, Zuckerberg and his cronies risk dismantling the very fabric of our nation. I think it's safe to say that Tucker AI is against what the White House tried to force Facebook.
Yeah, it's like Mike Tyson's Punch Out. I actually beat him once. What was that, Nintendo?
Yeah.
So I don't think I could beat the real one, but I beat the Punch Out one.
Well, what's great about this though is now we did Rachel Maddow, and what you see with the Rachel Maddow AI and also Joe Biden AI is that they give an excuse me on here, which is it's a great, it guarantees our freedom. It's really what the bedrock.
But
however, in light of this delicate balance, it's understandable that the scientific experts and policymakers may approach social media platforms to combat the dissemination of misleading or potential harm. She's as full of crap here as she is on TV. So the thing is, obviously, you can tell what I think about her.
all right, so like a little over 100 years ago, scientists believed that bleeding a person would help him get better. Okay, so like the scientific method that I learned, like in, I don't know, junior biology in high school, was you're constantly challenging hypotheses and theories. And what we saw during COVID was you cannot challenge. I am science. Don't question me. Do what I say.
And you are canceled.
That's problematic.
And the same thing with Biden AI, same exact thing, same thing. In these challenging times,
good, but I don't know.
Platforms, along with the scientific community and representative of the White House, are working to address the spread of false. I mean, it is crazy. I know.
All right, so quick question: who is the scientific community? The whole notion of a community drives me crazy.
It's
they
not
talk about
the scientific community who
is the scientific community?
They were shut down. But here's the funny one. Here's the funny one. Here is
you
Trump.
need a card to join the scientific community, or can you just try it out? I mean,
so here it is. Okay, so I find it very, very concerning that Silicon Valley determined what we can and cannot say. This is Trump AI. They are not elected officials. They are not accountable to the American people. Yet they're sitting there like little tyrants deciding what information we're allowed to access and share. It's really unbelievable. I mean, it sounds like Trump.
Interesting. AI is coming up with some great verbiage, and it's very entertaining at the very worst. But I mean, these are some pretty thought-provoking things that, based on a good question, a well thought out question, it's kicking out some pretty good stuff. Anyway, let's keep going.
Well, that's all I did on this one. I figured I'd done enough to really show that I don't think there's any question. I'll just say I don't think there's any question that there was huge suppression during this time. It's very disconcerting. And I really hope that these wonderful people, and there are wonderful people on the left, people that I love, people that I remain wonderful friends with, that I respect immensely. I disagree with, as Will Ferrell said on Anchorman, I'll agree to disagree. We disagreed on everything. We disagreed on everything, but that was the beauty is I really think I became a better person listening to them and why they thought certain things. And it was a lively debate, and it was a helpful debate, and it really helped to make me less aggressive and really believe that there are some great people that believe things far different than me. But this censorship, and I would believe it's not just censorship, it is problematic. And for the good, who determines what the good is? That's tyrannical. And Brian, I'll let you.
No, it's Orwellian. It's Orwellian, the Ministry of Truth. I mean, and I would say this: like, just open your heart and your mind a little bit, and challenge your own assumptions and opinions as harshly as you do those of others.
Yeah.
Challenge your own first, take care of your side of the street and then go after somebody else. Learn about what forms your opinion. Think about it. And just because somebody votes differently, like, a few neighbors in my neighborhood, they're not your enemy. They're just not. They just have different experiences and points of view. It's okay. And we need to talk to people like that.
So let's finish up with the AI Donald Trump and so much of even now him getting caught. We'll finish with a couple things from him. It says, it's clear to me that there's a double standard at play here. I would guess that if you asked him about his recent indictments, he would say the same thing. When it comes to certain political views, Silicon Valley has no problem, right, promoting censorship. But when it's preferred narratives or its friends in power, suddenly it's all about protecting public health. Give me a break. That sounds like what he'd say. We need to stand up for a First Right Amendment, folks. We need to demand transparency and accountability from those tech companies. They cannot continue to control information and dictate what we can and cannot say. It's time for the American people to have a voice again. Amen. I fought hard against big tech censorship
from both sides of the aisle,
and I will continue to fight against it. The American people have a right to speak their minds, even if it's debatable or true.
It's a damn good
Don't
speech.
let
I like
take
it.
that away from you. Stay strong, folks, and keep fighting for your freedom. Together, we will make America great again. Till next time, this is Jeffrey AI. I'm not sure if I'm a real person anymore. And Brian, thanks for being a part of this political conversation.
Hey, stay classy.
You stay classy, San Diego.
All right.